This is your Global Business Report. The just concluded Agriculture Summit Africa is one of the continent's leading privately funded platforms dedicated to increasing the value of the agribusiness value chain by creating a convergence of private and public sector interest, development finance institutions, agribusiness investors, and other players. This year's edition featured 4 panels over 2 days of deliberations with discussions on a number of important areas around the agriculture sector in Africa's largest economy. The event was hosted by Sterling Bank and invited key stakeholders, including the Lagos State Commissioner for Agriculture, the country manager of Netherlands-based Rabobank, and other key figures in the agriculture ecosystem. The Chief Executive of Sterling Bank PLC, Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, has said the bank is ready and willing to invest more in Nigeria's agric sector, having invested more than 100 billion naira, a figure that represents about 15% of the bank's total loans portfolio. He stated this in his closing remarks at the Agriculture Summit Africa 2022 with the theme, Engineering a $1 Trillion Agricultural Economy, which held recently, both physically and virtually, with more than 10,000 attendees from around the world. Joining me now to discuss this further is Dr. Olushola Obinkanye. He's the Group Head for Agriculture and Solid Minerals Finance at Sterling Bank PLC, and is live here in our studios. Good morning. Good to see you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
So we're going to leave what is under the ground this morning, which is the solid minerals, and talk about what is over the ground, which is agriculture.
Right.
Great. So this is in your portfolio, by the way. What does this summit mean for you and the wider value chain in Nigeria? 100 billion on the table so far. That's enough to set up. How many banking licenses will I get with that?
About 4 of that. Right.
That's huge.
Right. Thank you very much. So for us in Sterling, we have devoted considerable resources to about 5 critical sectors of the Nigerian economy. And this is for because we are very persuaded that these sectors are pivotal to the economic revival and well-being of Nigeria. These sectors are the health sector, education, agriculture, renewable energy, and transportation. Now, for agriculture, we are persuaded that Nigeria can not just feed itself domestically, we can also go on to feed not just Africa also, but be significant players as far as the food ecosystem, the global food ecosystem is concerned. And part of our strategic thrust, to making sure that our role as financial service providers are concerned, is to ensure that the value chain, the various segments of the value chain are examined in such a manner that we will have what I would call a seamless flow of activities across the various subsectors of agriculture. The Agriculture Summit Africa is an advocacy of Sterling Bank that seeks to bring together the stakeholders in the sector and try and see how we can provide solutions to the various issues that we know bedeviling our sector.
One of the key issue here has to do with import substitution, because we're still heavy on food products imports. So what is this all about, import substitution? Do we have a hand on it, as it were?
Well, the conversation is ongoing, but we all know that Nigeria is still very much an import-dependent country, despite the fact that production has increased locally. We still have a tremendous amount that we spend on food importation. There's a lot of gap. I think currently we spend about $2 billion US on food importation, despite the fact that we still have, I think we've recorded some considerable improvement in local production, but it's still not just enough.
We just have too many mouths to feed, or what?
Too many mouths to feed. Livestock are also there. There's also the issues of industrial offtake. And so it is not just about national food security. It's about economic sustainability, raw material aggregation for our industry. industries, and of course the well-being of our livestock. And so there is that need for us to begin to deepen the conversation around what we can do differently to be able to increase or improve on our local production. Despite the fact that we have all of these indices around increase in rice production, increase in maize and all, we still find out that we are still having a lot more of importation in this corridor.
So I'm going to ask you, where is the fault line for us? Is it at the upstream, the midstream, or the downstream part of agriculture in terms of sustainability? What do we need to do? Is it still in the agrarian level of going to the farm, which has been done for thousands of years, or the midstream sector or the agro-industrialization team?
So I think we still have, I would say it's for all of them. Because you see, the value chain is broken in fragments across all of these streams. And we need to just intervene to make sure that we connect the fragmented segments of the value chain so that we can turn the tap and it will flow on a sustainable basis. And so when you talk, when you speak to maximizing the productivity, for instance, you will need to speak to best agronomic practices. You will need to speak to increase in productivity. You will need to speak to climate smart agriculture, urban agriculture, and some other trends that we believe will really go a long way in sustaining whatever it is that we are produced. Because truth be told, yes, Nigeria is producing a critical quantum of food, but by the time it comes, you examine the cycle of production down to consumption, you would have lost about 42%.
Of what comes from the farm
whatever comes from the
before it gets to the dinner table.
So it's a conversation that must be taken wholesomely.
Technology is part of that, isn't it?
Technology is part of it.
You discussed that at your summit.
Absolutely. Agri-tech is very, very important right now. We need to think out of the box. 40 years ago, this sector was neglected, and some 10 years back, I think there has been an increasing interest in coming back to the same. And to a large extent, the world has moved on. We now have a lot of technology and innovative solutions, digital solutions that are now very much relevant to agriculture, the business of agriculture. So we need to think out of the box. We need to think locally. We need to be innovative about our technology and how we go about it in Nigeria.
I'm just thinking about how you folks sit down at the board, at the management level at Sterling Bank, and you think agriculture is the next thing to deal with instead of just buying treasury bills and whatever, because it doesn't sound very sexy, as it were, if you permit me to use that. So what's the thinking in Sterling Bank to say, look, we need to focus on every part of the ecosystem of agriculture, and we need to mainstream it, because 100 billion of your portfolio in agriculture, right, considering the environment in which we work and live and play, is a tough one.
Yes, so we believe in Sterling that the sector that produces over 65% of jobs, employment for the population is that sector that will ultimately lead to economic prosperity on a sustainable basis. We all know the mine of wealth that agriculture is, not just in Nigeria, but also in Africa. We have discovered in Sterling, and of course, this is a knowledge that is out there in the space, that the greatest powerhouse, potential powerhouse of Nigeria is still in agriculture, where we have the land, we have the manpower, and in fact, we have the market. And we believe that both internally and for international trade, we know that agric is the sector to be in if you really want to really do good business in a climate like ours on a prosperous and sustainable basis.
Is it profitable?
It is profitable. Agriculture is profitable to the extent that best agronomic practices are adopted, to the extent that we have the correct infrastructure, to the extent that we are able to leverage technology and innovative solution to ensure that our produce are at their maximum, and we're able to still deliver quality to the last mile, whether it is you're speaking to the local production or you're even speaking to international trade. agriculture is profitable, it is sustainable, and is the the bedrock of any economy that you can actually think about in the world.
And it goes into all the other 4 pillars you talked about, whether it's education, healthcare, whatever, food comes first, whatever we're talking about. But again, here is the central bank are doing interventions in agriculture space. Recently, Nigeria signed on with the AFDB and a few other DFIs for about $500 million in terms of agro-processing zones in Nigeria. The first phase was flagged off just last week. I'm sure that's your game.
Yeah, that is it. Essentially, we must thank the central bank for what they have done in the space. I think that is the way to go, to incentivize the sector and to make sure that they step in to fill the gaps that only the government can. But we all know that intervention funds are not sustainable. They are meant to actually, like I said, induce growth.
It's an emergency funding.
It's an emergency funding. Banks and other stakeholders now have to develop the requisite capacity to step into that shoe effectively when at some point the policy changes direction and the intervention funds are no longer on the table. For the AFDB, we want to, for all intent and purpose, it's a welcome development. I believe that that particular initiative will have its reverberating impact over the next several years, I will say, because it's really it's an idea whose time has come.
We've been talking so much about all the technical and all that issues. So what's the price of rice? That's what my production team, everybody out there in the newsrooms want to know. We can't bring you in here without knowing what the price of rice will be by Christmas. It's just about a few days, 3 weeks away from now. So here you are the man.
Well, I do not want to be I do not want to be
I'm sure your customers in Sterling Bank are watching and say, okay, here's the man in agriculture. Give me a bag of rice.
Well, I think the prevailing market price right now is about 38,000 per bag. We have had issues with flood. I'm sure you have heard about that. And the predominant quantum of land affected by flood.
Hasn't that price gone to 45 already?
Well, I probably am looking at it from another aspect, but I think as at the last 24 hours, consistent with the data that came to me, I think we were somewhere at 38. Again, I think, well, in view of what is happening, I see a rise, and sadly so, in the bag. In the price of a rice. Bag of rice by December, by Christmas, primarily due to demand and what actually happened out there on the field. But again, it speaks to import substitution and some of the issues that are attendant to it. The government policy, laudable as it has been largely protective. Instead of addressing the issue of production. And I would say that they have addressed the issue of production, but I think we need to do more in that area. Benin Republic, which is just about 6% of the population of Nigeria, spends 51 times more on the importation of rice. So for all intent and purpose, through the ECOWAS corridor, we are going to still see more influx, either legally or through smuggling. I really don't know the impact that is going to have on the price at the end of the day. But again, it is part of the conversation that we have had. And of course, we are out with, we are coming out with a communique on the direction to go on how to ensure that whatever it is that we produce is sufficient enough for us.
Is there going to be a promo at the end of that communique when you finish writing it? If Sterling Bank is doing a promo, make sure the price of rice is sustainable for Nigerians, at least for your bank customers for the year. Thank you. Take that to the board.
Thank you very much.
If it's going to be approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Olushola Obinkanye, head of Group Head for Agriculture and Solid Minerals at Sterling Bank PLC, doing sustainable agriculture.